She stood alone in the hallway of her childhood home turned prison, her child Sip's trembling hand gripping hers as distant laughter echoed from the mansion beyond, until a familiar text message lit her phone, carrying a name she thought she Sipped, lost forever. The heavy oak door clicked shut with a sound of finality that echoed the coldness in her mother-in-law's eyes. Ji-eun Kim stood in the dimly lit corridor, the polished marble floor chilling her through the thin soles of her shoes. Her 5-year-old son, Min-jun, pressed his face into her side, his small body trembling with silent sobs. Outside, dusk settled over the manicured lawns of the grand estate, but here in the service hallway, the air was stale and thick with the scent of lemon-scented cleaner and betrayal. The faint, muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted from the main wing of the mansion, a cruel reminder of the family celebration she was no longer a part of. Her knuckles were white where she clutched the thin strap of her worn handbag, the only possession she had been allowed to take. Everything else, her clothes, her son's toys, the last remnants of her late husband, remained locked away inside. Before we continue with the story, be sure to let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments. We love learning about our viewers. Now let's get back to the story. Her father-in-law had not even looked at her. He had stared at a point on the wall just over her shoulder, his voice a low, dispassionate monotone as he declared her presence a disgrace to their family name. A single mother, a widow whose husband had died in a tragic accident, was now an inconvenient stain on their immaculate reputation. Min-jun's grandfather had simply turned his back, leaving his wife to deliver the final brutal verdict. "You will leave now," Hai-jin Choi had said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Do not attempt to contact us again. The boy is your burden to bear." The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering as shards of glass. Jae-yoon's own key to the house had been plucked from her hand, the metal cool against her skin for a fleeting moment before it was gone. She had been escorted to this side exit, a path reserved for servants and deliveries, a final, deliberate humiliation. The corridor lights flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that made the space feel even more like a tomb. What do I do? Where do I go? The thoughts circled in her mind, a frantic, desperate loop. She had no family of her own to turn to. Her parents had passed away years ago, leaving her with only the memories of a happier, simpler time. Her savings were nearly gone, depleted by her husband's medical bills, and now completely inaccessible, locked away in a joint account her in-laws controlled. She squeezed Min-jun's hand, a silent promise that she would not let him see her fall apart. He looked up at her, his big, dark eyes filled with a confusion that tore at her heart more than any insult. "Ioma," he whispered, his voice raspy from crying, "is Grandpa mad at us?" She knelt, pulling him into a tight embrace, burying her face in his soft hair to hide the tears that threatened to spill over. "No, my love," she murmured, her voice thick with unshed grief. "They are just busy. We're going on a little adventure, just the two of us." A wave of dizziness washed over her. She hadn't eaten since morning, her stomach churning with a mixture of dread and disbelief. The distant sounds of the party grew louder for a moment, as a door opened and closed somewhere deep within the house, followed by a fresh burst of laughter. They were celebrating her brother-in-law's promotion, a joyous occasion that had served as the perfect backdrop for her quiet expulsion. She felt a bitter taste rise in her throat. She had once been part of that family, had shared meals at their table, had laughed at their jokes. Now she was nothing, an outsider shivering in a forgotten hallway. Her gaze fell upon the sleek, modern lines of the security panel by the door. A single red light glowed, indicating it was armed. They had not only cast her out, they had secured the perimeter against her return. The finality of it was absolute. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Min-jun's small hand tugged at her sleeve. "Oma, I'm cold." The thin fabric of his jacket was no match for the creeping chill. She wrapped her arms around him more tightly, trying to shield him with her own body heat, a futile gesture against the encroaching night. She had to move, had to find shelter. The thought of spending the night on the streets with her son sent a fresh surge of panic through her. She reached into her handbag, her fingers fumbling for her phone. The screen was cracked, the battery hovering at a perilous 15%. It was her only link to the outside world, a world that suddenly felt vast and indifferent. Who can I call? The question echoed in the emptiness of her mind. Her friends were mostly casual acquaintances from her brief married life, people tied to her in-laws' social circle. They would offer sympathy, perhaps, but no real help. Calling them would only lead to more gossip, more humiliation. Her pride, though battered and bruised, was all she had left. She refused to beg. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the cool air stinging her lungs. One step. She just needed to take one step, and then another. She had to be strong for Min Jun. She pulled her son closer, his small weight a comforting, grounding presence. "Come on, sweet boy," she whispered, her voice gaining a sliver of resolve. "Let's go find a warm place." She guided him toward the end of the long corridor, away from the main house and toward the public street beyond the iron gates. Each step felt heavy, as if she were wading through water. The muffled sounds of the party faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of the city in the distance. The world outside the gilded cage of her in-laws' home was waiting, and for the first time, she was truly on her own. The weight of that responsibility settled upon her shoulders, a crushing burden. She pushed open the heavy service door, revealing a narrow, tree-lined street. The last light of day was fading, painting the sky in shades of purple and gray. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scent of rain. As she stood on the pavement, the vastness of the city spread out before her, a daunting panorama of flickering lights and endless roads. Min Jun shivered, and she knelt to zip his jacket up to his chin. "I have to be strong. For him," the mantra repeated in her head, a fragile shield against the rising tide of despair. She straightened up, her gaze scanning the street as if searching for an answer, a sign, anything. It was then that her phone buzzed in her hand, a faint vibrating pulse against her cold skin. She glanced down, expecting a low battery warning or a junk notification. But the screen was lit with a message from an unknown number. Her brow furrowed in confusion. She didn't recognize the number, and she rarely received texts from anyone she didn't know. Hesitantly, she tapped the notification, her thumb hovering over the glowing screen. The message was brief, just 2 words that made her breath catch in her throat. "Ji-yoon?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Who would be texting her? Who even knew what was happening to her in this exact moment? She stared at the screen, the glowing letters seeming to mock her isolation. It had to be a mistake, a wrong number. No one was coming to her rescue. No one even knew she needed rescuing. She was about to dismiss the message, to turn off her phone and conserve what little battery she had left, when a second message appeared. This one was just a name, a single word that sent a jolt through her system, a name she hadn't heard or spoken in over a decade. It was a name tied to a box of old faded letters tucked away in a storage unit she could no longer afford. A name from a life she thought she had left behind forever. A ghost from her past, reaching out to her in her darkest hour. Her fingers trembled as she read the text again, her mind struggling to connect the past with the desperate present. The screen glowed with a message from the unknown number, and her heart froze at the sudden reminder of promises made long ago. The text read, "It's me, Hyun-woo." The name Hyun-woo glowed on the cracked screen, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Ji-yoon stared at it, her mind reeling. Hyun-woo, her childhood pen pal, the boy from a distant city she had exchanged letters with for years, sharing dreams and secrets on crisp, lined paper. It couldn't be. It was impossible. They had lost touch long before high school ended, their correspondence fading as life pulled them in different directions. How could he possibly be texting her now? How would he even have her number? A flicker of a memory, the scrawled handwriting on a faded aerogram, surfaced in her mind before being washed away by the immediate, crushing reality of her situation. Min Jun whimpered beside her, his small voice pulling her back to the cold pavement. "Yeoma, who is it?" he asked, peering at the phone. She couldn't answer. She didn't have an answer. The message felt like a dream, a strange, disjointed fragment of a life that was no longer hers. A life where she had friends who remembered her. A life before she became a widow, a pariah. Was it a cruel joke, a trick of her exhausted mind? Miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking the glittering expanse of Seoul, a man stared at his own phone, his thumb hovering over the send button. His name was Hyun-woo, though the world knew him as Chairman Kang, the young, formidable CEO of a major tech corporation. The city lights spread out beneath him like a carpet of diamonds, a world he had conquered through relentless ambition and sharp intellect. But tonight, the view offered no satisfaction. His gaze was fixed on the screen, on the name Ji-Yoon Kim. He had just sent the message, his heart pounding with an uncharacteristic uncertainty. For weeks, a persistent nagging memory had driven him to search for her. He had told himself it was simple curiosity, a loose end from his past he wanted to tie up. He had hired a private investigator, a discreet inquiry that had led him down a rabbit hole of public records and social media profiles. The search had culminated in a discovery that had chilled him to the bone, a short, desperate post on an online single mother's forum. The post was anonymous, but the details were specific enough. A young widow, a 5-year-old son, cruel in-laws in a wealthy district. The user's handle, Dandelion Wishes, struck a chord deep within him. It was the same name she had used to sign her letters all those years ago. Dandelions, she had written in one letter, can grow anywhere, even in the cracks of the pavement. They're strong. He had found her, but the circumstances were worse than he could have imagined. His investigator had confirmed the rest: her husband's death, the family's immense wealth, and the whispers of their cold treatment of the young widow. He had found her public phone number through a registered business inquiry she had made months ago, a hopeful but failed attempt to start a small online shop. He had acted on impulse, a surge of protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. He had sent the text, his formal corporate world colliding with a fragile piece of his own history. What if she doesn't remember me? The thought was a strange, vulnerable intrusion into his usually ordered mind. Jae-yoon's fingers felt numb. She reread the name, Hyun-woo, the boy who had sent her a pressed 4-leaf clover in a letter once, wishing her luck on her middle school exams. The boy whose letters had been a lifeline during her lonely teenage years after her parents passed. Could it truly be him? Or was this some kind of scam? A predator sensing her vulnerability? The paranoia was a cold, slick serpent coiling in her gut. She was a single mother, alone, with no one to protect her. She had to be careful, yet a part of her, a small, foolishly hopeful part, clung to the possibility. A friend. A voice from a time when she was just Jae-yoon, not a widow, not a burden. The thought was so tempting, it made her ache. With trembling fingers, she typed a cautious reply, her words stark and simple. Who is this? It was a test, a demand for proof. She could not afford to trust blindly. Her son's safety depended on her skepticism. Back in his office, Hyun-woo saw her reply flash onto his screen. Who is this? The question was guarded, fearful. He had expected it. He leaned back in his leather chair, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. He had to prove it was him. But how? How do you summarize a shared childhood of ink and paper in a text message? He thought back to their letters, to the small, intimate details they had shared. He remembered her telling him about her dream of opening a small flower shop, a place filled with light and color. He remembered her favorite flower was the freesia, because it smelled like new beginnings. He typed slowly, carefully choosing his words. You told me you wanted to open a flower shop called Jae-yoon's Garden, he sent. He waited, his breath held. It was a detail no one else could possibly know, a secret whispered across hundreds of miles in a childish scrawl. He watched the 3 dots appear and disappear, her hesitation palpable even through the digital interface. Jae-yoon gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jae-yoon's Garden. The name of her imaginary shop, a dream she had confided only to her pen pal. No one else knew. Not her late husband, not her friends, not even her own parents. It was a secret kept between 2 lonely children. It was him. It was really him. Tears welled in her eyes. Hot and sudden. They weren't tears of sadness or despair, but of a profound, overwhelming relief. It was the feeling of a drowning person breaking the surface, of a lost traveler seeing a familiar landmark. Someone remembered her. Someone from before all of this, before the grief and the humiliation. The knowledge was a tiny, warm flame igniting in the cold emptiness of her chest, but the relief was quickly followed by a wave of shame. What must he think of her now? The successful CEO, his company was a household name, and the destitute single mother standing on a darkened street. Her past and present were colliding in the most brutal way imaginable. Hyun-woo sensed her turmoil. Her long pause spoke volumes. He knew he was treading on delicate ground. He had to be careful not to scare her away, not to overwhelm her with his position or his resources. He had to be the friend she remembered, not the powerful stranger he had become. He needed more information, needed to understand the immediate threat she was in. He sent another message, his tone deliberately gentle. "Jaeyoon, are you safe? Where are you?" The question hung in the air between them, a digital lifeline thrown across the city. He swiveled his chair to face his computer, his expression hardening with a new resolve. He was no longer the boy who could only offer words of encouragement in a letter. He was a man with power and influence, and he would use every bit of it to help her. He opened a secure internal network on his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was a man of action, and the time for passive observation was over. Jaeyoon read his question, and a sob escaped her lips, a raw, ragged sound. "Am I safe?" No, she wasn't. She was cold, hungry, and terrified, with a small child depending on her for everything. The kindness in his simple question was her undoing. The dam of her composure finally broke, and tears streamed down her face. She typed a frantic, disjointed reply, her thumbs clumsy with cold and emotion. "They threw us out. My in-laws. We have nowhere to go." The admission was humiliating, but she was too desperate to care. She was confessing her failure to the one person from her past, whose opinion she suddenly valued more than anything. She hit send, the message flying into the digital ether, a desperate plea for help. She was placing her trust in a memory, in a ghost from another life. It was the biggest gamble she had ever taken. She had nothing left to lose. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened as he read her message. A cold fury, sharp and precise, settled over him, threw them out. The words echoed in his mind, fueling a protective rage he had not felt since he was a boy, defending his own family from creditors. He looked at her words on his phone, then at the sprawling city below. In this city, he was a king, and in his city, Ji-yoon would not be homeless. He sent a quick, reassuring reply, "Stay where you are, I will handle it. Do not move." He then turned his full attention to his computer. He brought up a restricted file, one protected by multiple layers of corporate security. It was a file he had created years ago, a digital archive of his past. He entered a complex alphanumeric passcode, one he had never shared with anyone. The system recognized the code, the screen flickering for a moment before a new window opened. Inside the folder were scanned copies of every letter she had ever sent him, each one a fragile artifact of a connection he had refused to forget. The corporate passcode unlocked his private files, hinting at his deeper connection. The files opened, revealing a digital archive of a shared history. Scanned pages of faded notebook paper, filled with Jaeyoon's looping, youthful handwriting, sat alongside his own more angular script. For a moment, Hyun-woo was no longer a CEO in a high-rise tower, but a lonely boy finding solace in a friendship that existed only through the mail. He saw the pressed dandelion she had sent him, now digitized and preserved. He read her words about wanting to be strong, about finding hope in the cracks of the world. A fierce determination solidified within him. He was no longer a boy who could only offer words. He was a man who could offer a fortress. He minimized the window of memories and opened a new one, this one connected to his company's real estate division. He typed a series of commands, his fingers moving with practiced speed. He was not just finding her a temporary shelter, he was securing her a new beginning. Within minutes, he had located a vacant, fully furnished two-bedroom apartment in a high-security residential building owned by his corporation, not far from his own office. He bypassed the usual rental protocols, assigning the lease directly to a private account he controlled. He sent another text to Jaeyoon. "I have a safe place for you and your son. It's an apartment. A car is on its way to your location. The driver's name is Mr. Park. He will show you a photo of a four-leaf clover on his phone. Trust him. He knew the detail about the clover would be the proof she needed. Another secret between them. He then made a call to his head of security, a man whose loyalty was absolute. "Mr. Park," he said, his voice calm but laced with an undeniable authority. "I have a task of the utmost personal importance." He gave the man Jae-yoon's location and the instructions. He also arranged for a corporate credit card with a substantial limit to be delivered with the apartment keys, ensuring she would have immediate access to funds for food, clothing, and anything else she and Minjun needed. He was building a wall of security around her. Brick by digital brick, he would not let the world break her. He would be the guardian angel he had unknowingly promised to be all those years ago. Jae-yoon saw the message, and her breath hitched. An apartment? A car? It was too much, too fast. It felt like a fever dream. But the mention of the four-leaf clover, the one he had sent her in a letter when she was 14, cut through her disbelief. It was a secret sign, a password from their shared past. It was real. This was happening. Just then, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the gloom. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, his expression professional and kind. He approached her cautiously, as if not to startle a frightened animal. "Miss Jae-yoon Kim?" he asked. She nodded, clutching Minjun's hand. The man held up his phone. On the screen was a crisp, clear photograph of a perfect four-leaf clover. Tears of relief streamed down Jae-yoon's face as she let out a shuddering breath. "Yes," she whispered. "That's me." Mr. Park opened the car door for them. "Chairman Kang sent me," he said simply. "Let's get you and the young man somewhere warm." The apartment was beautiful. It was warm, modern, and filled with soft, welcoming light. The refrigerator was fully stocked, the bedrooms had fresh linens on the beds, and there was a small box of new toys sitting on the living room floor. Minjun, his fear forgotten, let out a gasp of delight and ran towards a bright red toy car. Ji-yoon stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the rescue. Mr. Park handed her a key card and a credit card. "The chairman also arranged for a position for you at the company headquarters, should you be interested," he said. "It is in the archival department. He mentioned you have a fondness for history." Ji-yoon was speechless. It wasn't just a handout, it was a future, a job, a life. The name on the credit card was simply Ji-yoon Kim, her own name. For the first time in years, she felt like she was her own person again, not just someone's widow or someone's daughter-in-law. She was Ji-yoon. The next morning, after a night of deep, dreamless sleep in a safe, warm bed, Jae-yoon found the courage to send Hein-woo another message. "Thank you," she typed. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." His reply came almost instantly. "Your friendship was payment enough long ago. Get settled. We can talk when you're ready." He gave her space, the most valuable gift of all. She spent the next few days buying new clothes for herself and Minjun, filling their new home with the sounds of life. Minjun's laughter, a sound she hadn't heard in months, echoed through the apartment. She accepted the job offer, eager to stand on her own 2 feet, to build a life on the foundation Hein-woo had provided. Her first day at the company was nerve-wracking, but the work was peaceful, sorting and digitizing old company documents. It was a quiet, stable existence, a world away from the gilded cage she had escaped. She had not yet seen Hein-woo in person, and a part of her was terrified of the meeting, of facing the boy from her letters who was now the man who had saved her. The confrontation she had been dreading came not from Hyun-woo, but from her past. A week after she moved into her new apartment, the front desk called up to her office. Her in-laws were in the lobby, demanding to see her. A cold dread filled her, but it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. She was no longer the frightened, helpless woman they had cast out. She agreed to meet them in a private conference room. When she walked in, she saw her father-in-law and her mother-in-law, Hee-jin Choi, standing there, their expressions a mixture of shock and desperation. They had clearly learned who her benefactor was. The news of her new apartment and her job at Chairman Kang's company had undoubtedly spread through their social circles like wildfire. The shame of having cast out someone now under the protection of one of the country's most powerful men was written all over their faces. Jae-yoon, her father-in-law began, his voice strained. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Jin Choi rushed forward, her face pale. We were overcome with grief, she said, her voice trembling with a false sincerity. We want you to come home. We want to be a family again. For Min Jun's sake. Jae-yoon looked at them, at their desperate, grasping faces, and she felt nothing but a quiet pity. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. They were terrified of the consequences of their cruelty, of the powerful man whose quiet favor she now had. No, she said, her voice steady and clear. My son and I have a home. We are a family. Just as her mother-in-law opened her mouth to plead again, the conference room door opened. Hyun-woo stepped inside, his presence commanding the space. He didn't look at her in-laws. His eyes were only on her, and they were filled with a warm, protective light. Is there a problem here, Miss Kim? He asked, his voice calm. The in-laws froze, their faces draining of all color as they recognized the formidable Chairman Kang. They looked from him to Jae-yoon, the connection finally, devastatingly clear in their minds. Yoon-woo walked over to stand beside Jae-yoon, a silent, unshakable show of support. I believe this meeting is over, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Her father-in-law simply nodded, unable to speak. Yoon Choi stared at Jae-yoon, her eyes wide with a dawning horror and regret. They turned and shuffled out of the room, their arrogance replaced by a deep public shame. They had cast out a daughter-in-law. They had angered a titan. The social and financial repercussions would be swift and severe. Yoon-woo turned to Jae-yoon, his expression softening. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Yes, she said, I am. That evening, Hyun-woo walked her and Min Jun to the entrance of their apartment building. He knelt down to Min Jun's level. I have a feeling you and I are going to be great friends, he said, his smile genuine. Min Jun, who had been shy at first, giggled and nodded. Jae-yoon watched them, her heart full. He was no longer just a ghost from her past, or a powerful CEO. He was Hyun-woo, her friend, her guardian angel. As she and Min Jun stepped into the warm lobby of their new home, she glanced back through the glass doors. Outside, in the fading light, she saw the figures of her in-laws, standing on the opposite side of the street, watching them. They looked small and defeated. As Jae-yoon turned her back on them, and led her laughing son towards the elevator, the in-laws finally turned and walked away, their shoulders slumped in a portrait of irreversible shame and loss. The door to her new life was open, and the door to her past was finally irrevocably closed.